All right, welcome to lesson 12:6. We are going to be learning how to model multiplying decimals. This should be review for you. We've talked a little bit about this already, but we're going to go through it again to make sure that you really know what you're doing. Now, to be honest, there's not many times in life where you are going to need to model multiplying decimals. You're just going to multiply them using your math skills. But this is kind of important because they want you to be able to visualize what is happening when you multiply a fraction. So we're going to go ahead and do this, and there are, I think, at least one test question on this. So you want to make sure that you know what you're doing. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this. Right here, I skipped the story problem for today. It was a little bit complicated, and I don't want that to get mixed up in our actual lesson that we need to know, which is doing the modeling part. So we're going to skip the story problem part. So if you're in your book, we're going to skip that. And right here is what the story problem, the actual math sentence equals what that we are trying to figure out. We're trying to figure out 4/10 times 6/10 and what that equals. Now, what you could do, because we already know how to do this, is you could forget about the decimals. You could just take 4 times 6 and you would get 24, right? We already know how to do this. And then you look and you say, oh, there's one decimal spot, here's another decimal spot. So there's 2 decimal places. That means you would take this decimal that's currently in the back and you're gonna move it 1, 2 spots to the left, and your answer would be 0.24. All right, we already know how to do that, so really we wouldn't need to model, but we're going to learn how to do this anyway. So let's look over here where we have this. It says, using a 10 by 10 grid, the grid represents one whole. Okay, so this right here represents one whole, the number 1. All right, now this right here, there's 10 of these strips. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So each of these strips represents 1/10, right? 1/10 of a unit. 1/10 of a whole. How do you write 1/10? Right here, 1/10. That's the 10th spot. Now here's something that you're going to need to know. You could model a 10th like this, up and down vertically. These are each tenths. These are each 1/10. Or you could, let's go forward here. Or you could go this way. This is a 10th, and this is a 10th. These are each tenths, right? Remember we learned that, like, a block, one whole grid or block is a whole, but one strip is going to be a 10th, either horizontally or vertically, either way. All right, so knowing that each of these squares, there's 100 of these little squares. Each of these little squares represent 1/100th of a square unit. Okay, so that should be review. We should know that this whole block is a whole, one whole. Each strip, either horizontally or vertically, is going to be a 10th, and each little square is going to represent 1/100th of a square unit. All right, that's a quick little review before we head into modeling decimals. If you know that, then this should be fairly easy. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to move to right here where it says shade to show the factors. Now you know what a factor is. If we go back up here to our problem, 4/10 is a factor, 6/10 is a factor, and then your answer is going to be called a what? When you're dealing with multiplication, we have a factor and a product. Okay, those are important vocabulary words. Factor times a factor equals a product. So this instruction says shade to show the factors. So we're going to shade to show 4/10. How do we show 4/10? We shade 4/10 strips. That would equal 4/10. So you can see they did that right here. They shaded 4 horizontal strips, each of them representing 1/10. So therefore, this right here representing 4/10. So all they did was they took one of the factors and they represented it horizontally on our model. What are you going to do next? You're going to shade the 6 columns blue to show 6/10. So they took this other factor and they went vertically to shade in 6 columns to show 6/10. Okay, do you see how they did that? They shaded all that in one direction and all of the other factor in the other direction. And then where do we find the product? So it says find the product. The overlapping area represents the product. Right here is where you can see the red and the blue both overlapped. So what are we going to do? We are going to count these squares. What do these squares represent? They represent hundredths, remember? So we have 100th, 200th, 300th, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24 hundredths. How do we write that? 24 hundredths. And before I erase this, this would have matched what we did when we just did the multiplication. We took 6 times 4, and then we moved the decimal point over, right? These match. Here, I did it just using my math, and here I modeled it with a model. And honestly, when you get to the test or a quiz or even the review and it asks you to do the model, if I were you, I would also do this actually computation and double check and make sure you got it right. Make sure you didn't just miss one of these little squares or do something wrong. Okay, so it says the 24 overlapping squares show that the product is 24. And here does exactly, it tells you to do what I said. Check by multiplying equivalent fractions. All right, we're not going to do that. We're going to check by doing the computation just like you've learned in your past 2 lessons. All right, so here it gives you the answer to the story problem that we kind of skipped because we just want to focus on this concept. So let's go back and do a few practice ones. All right, I'm going to move this up. Okay, here we go. Our practice says write a multiplication sentence for the model. Okay, so they gave you the model already. They showed it to you, and they're saying you write the multiplication sentence. Well, how are we going to do that? We are going to look at the factor that is represented horizontally and the factor that is represented vertically. All right, so let's look at our horizontal factor. What is this going to be? We can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 strips that are shaded. 4 strips that each represent 1/10. So we have what would be our factor? Our factor would be 4/10. That's the factor that is represented right here by these 4 columns. So now our other factor is going to be right here vertically. We have 1, we have 1, 2, 3. We can see that there's 3 columns. 3 columns, each worth 1/10, means that our other factor is 3/10. So we're going to write 3/10. So this model is 4/10 times 3/10. Now, if you notice up here, it says write a multiplication sentence. A multiplication sentence involves an equal sign and involves an answer, right? If it said write a multiplication equation for the model, it would also require an answer. If it said write a multiplication expression, we know that an expression is just an expression. It does not require an answer. That would just be 4/10 times 3/10. Okay, but it's asking for a sentence. So we're going to give them a sentence which has an equal sign, which means we need to solve it. So we're going to go ahead and look up here, and we're going to see where do our 2 shaded factors overlap. They overlap right here. So we have 1/100th, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 hundredths. Remember the boxes, the little boxes equal hundredths. We have 12 hundredths. So our answer is going to be 12 hundredths. Now, like I said, I'm not going to just leave it there because I don't want to trust me counting up those little boxes. So I'm going to also compute the answer the mathematical way by just saying, take away the decimals, and I've got basically 4 times 3, which is 12, with a decimal point right there because it's a whole number. Now I'm going to count up the decimal places. 1, 2 decimal places means I move it once, twice, and now it goes right there. We put a 0 in front always so that we know we're dealing with the decimal point, just in case I can't see it. All right, so that's that one. Let's do a couple more and make sure you've really got this. Okay, let's do number 2. Okay, number 2. Let's first look horizontally. What do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 what? 7 tenths. Each bar is a tenth. So we've got 7 tenths for our first factor. Where do we find our second factor? We find our second factor right here, vertically. Okay, so we're going to count up our vertical bars. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We've also got 7 tenths as a factor vertically. Now our answer is going to be in the double shaded part, which is right here where they overlapped. Okay, I could count all these up. 1, or let me give you another way. Rather than me count up all these little boxes, we know that we can take 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and we can multiply it by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What is 7 times 7? It's 49, right? So we know that there are 49 what? 49 tenths, 49 thousandths, 49 hundredths. What are the little boxes? The little boxes are hundredths. We broke this big model up into 100 pieces. So we're saying that there are 49 of those hundredths that are double shaded. All right, let's check it. Let's do it without the decimal places. 7 times 7 is 49 with a decimal point right here. But we've got 1 place after the decimal, 2 places after the decimal. So we're going to move it back 2 spots, and our answers both match. So we know we got that one right for sure. And let's move on to number 3. You should be able to know factor times factor. We look vertically and horizontally. Sorry, we go horizontally and vertically. All right, what is our factor represented by the horizontal bars? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths, which we write like this, 6 tenths. All right, times what? Times what did we do vertically? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths. So there are 2 factors, and the answer is where they overlap, which is right here. All right, let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. 30 what? 30 wholes, 30 tenths, 30, you got it, 30 hundredths. So we went out to the hundredth spot. All right, so there's our answer, but let's double check it. Let's do math the other way. 6 times 5 equals 30. We've got 1 place after the decimal, 2 places after the decimal. So this decimal point that's right here, because it's a whole number, moves 1, 2 spots over and is right there, and we're going to squeeze in a 0. And they match, so we know we did a fabulous job.